Hello everyone, welcome back to another Let's Solve Tactics video. So last time we left off at 1926 rating. Yeah, let's see how far we can take it today. So black to move in this first problem. Go ahead if you would like to pause and try it yourself. Okay, so white just played this move, bishop to a6. Obviously, I think the point is if I take the bishop, they take my rook with the queen. Okay, so let's look at the material. In this very position, I think every single piece and pawn is present for both sides, so no material has been exchanged. Okay, so it's very early on in the opening. So one idea could be that this bishop a6 move works because the queen has, is attacking, is looking at the rook. So what if I go knight e5 and try to distract the queen from the, rook? So knight e5, now he has options. He can move the queen and keep her on the diagonal by going to e4. But in that case, I can play pawn to d5 and then possibly capture the bishop. So that's an idea. Other moves, taking the bishop and letting him capture. I don't see a follow-up. I don't think we are able to trap the queen after that. So we will just lose an exchange. So I'm going to explore 95 more. That looks like the so far the only promising move. So knight e5. Now he can throw a check with bishop b5 check, but then I'll be able to block that with pawn to c6, attacking his bishop, and also my knight is attacking his queen. So he might take on c6, but then I can recapture with the knight or pawn, and I'm winning a piece. So knight e5, bishop b5 check is no good, as far as I can tell. So queen d5, then I have pawn to d5. And even at that point, bishop b5 check will run into pawn to c6. So since I don't see any other moves, I'm going to play that. Okay, and now we are going down this. I don't think I want to block with a piece because then he can trade his bishop and move his queen. So I should attack the bishop. So this way, both his bishop and queen are attacked and he's going to end up losing one of them. Yeah, okay. Let's keep going. Okay, black to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause. So white just attacked my queen by going knight to e5. Also, I see my knight is hanging. This pawn is attacking the knight. Okay. There is some pressure around the king. Rook takes f2 could be considered. My queen is hitting this rook on h1, which is also protected only once by the other rook. So there may be some tactics there. My knight, even though attacked, is pretty actively placed. Okay, so let's look at some candidate moves. Moving the queen, of course, is possible. Queen f3 is not possible because the knight covers that square. So queen to g2, hitting the f2 pawn would be possible with the idea of, let's say, rook takes f2 or queen takes f2. So that's a candidate, queen g2. Offering a queen trade with queen to a4 is always possible, or queen to e4. Yeah. Any other moves? Rook takes f2 check directly is possible. Not sure what my follow-up is if he recaptures. Okay. Rook takes d4 I don't think leads to anything. I just lose my queen, and yeah, so that's not really a candidate. Okay, so queen g2, rook takes f2. Yeah. maybe some queen e4, queen a4 kind of things. So, okay, let's see. I'm going to briefly look at rook takes f2 because it's a check. So rook takes f2, king takes f2. Now the next check I have is knight to e4 check. And the king can simply come back to e2 or even go to some other places like let's say even g1. And I don't think I have anything there. So I'm rejecting rook takes f2. Queen to g2 is possible. It threatens something. So after queen to g2, if he takes my knight on c5, then rook takes f2 check will win his queen. Actually, if he takes my knight after queen takes g2, then queen takes f2 is, I think, mate because the d file will be opened up. Uh, so queen to g2 looks interesting. He can always defend with different types of moves like rook, either rook to f1, for example. And then I don't know what's my follow-up. Maybe there is something, but hmm. So if queen g2, let's say rook a to f1. Okay, if rook a to f1, then maybe I can still take on f2 with the rook. And then when he takes back, I can take the rook on h1. But then he has d takes c5, taking my knight at the end. So don't like that as much. Hmm. So if those moves are not working, or at least they seem like they're not working, then maybe queen e4, hitting his queen. If he takes, I take back, and I'm hitting f2. He can, yeah, again protect it with, let's say, rook to h2 even. And I'm not sure what I've gained. I've managed to trade, but also trading queens is not forced, I guess. Yeah. After queen to e4, he could play maybe something like queen c3. Really not sure what this problem is about. I may be missing something important. Just spending some time looking at my options. Knight e4 directly letting him take my queen, I don't think leads to anything. Hmm. Queen a4 is also possible, but just not sure. Hmm. Yeah, really not seeing anything. So then, out of those options, let me see any other options with that we have missed. With the queen, moves on the diagonal, g2, e4, or pulling it back to b7 or a8 even. But b7 or a8 leave my knight loose. So queen to g2 sort of saves both. But same thing maybe with queen to e4 because he cannot take my knight. And if he moves his queen away, is there some tactic? Well, my knight still is attacked, I guess. Huh. Queen to g2, maybe queen g2, rook f1, and then knight e4. Maybe that's the idea. hitting the f2 pawn again, and then saying how are you defending it maybe. And with knight on e4, I may also have threats like knight g3. I'm gonna go with that. I have to admit I'm not 100% sure, but let's see. So far so good. Okay, so knight to e4 I think was my follow-up, because then I'm threatening the f2 pawn. I'm also threatening a fork with on g3 using the pin. And how does he defend against both? If he moves either rook to g1, I think I can take on f2. So let's, okay, it keeps going. So wow, I didn't expect this to keep going. Okay. Huh. Mm, now what? Now I feel like I probably have to take on f2 somehow, but which way to take? If rook takes f2, I'm hitting the queen. He probably needs to take, so rook takes f2 back, and then queen takes h1, check. Now he can block on f1 with the rook, and then, or am I missing something? Rook takes f2, rook takes f2, or even knight takes f2. What happens if knight takes f2? Knight takes f2. Am I threatening anything? I'm sort of threatening. I mean, I'm threatening the rook on h1. Yes. Uh, possibly threatening some kind of knight d3 check, maybe, but not very clear. Knight takes f2. Let's say rook h2 g1. Uh, what am I doing there? If knight d3 check, queen takes d3, and he holds on to f1. I don't think I have anything there. So knight takes f2 doesn't look as appealing. What about knight to g3? Knight g3, I'm forking the rooks, so that's good. If the rook on h comes to g1, then yeah, then I am not sure what I do. So knight g3 doesn't look as great. Rook takes f2. Rook takes f2, threatening the queen. That's very forcing. So rook takes f2, rook takes f2, queen takes h1, and I win a pawn. Maybe that is good enough. Who knows? But I'm gonna. I do think I should play that. Other moves. Queen f1 directly, I don't think leads to anything. Queen h1 doesn't lead to anything. I'm gonna do this. So far so good. Now, well, now I have an option about which rook to take. Huh. Wow. Long problem. If I go on queen takes h1, then he blocks me with the rook on f1. Then queen h4 check maybe. Queen h4 check. King d1. Queen takes h5 check. King c1. Not sure where I'm going with that. What if knight takes f2? Knight takes f2. I threaten the rook on h1. And let's say rook to f1. Then what do I have? Knight takes f2, rook f1. Is knight d3 check a move? Knight d3 check. Queen takes d3 maybe. I don't think I have anything there. Hmm. So okay, if I take on f2, and if he takes back, then I take on h1. That's clear. But after f2, knight f2, that is, I think he probably plays rook f1, and my knight is hanging, and it is pinned. My knight is pinned. Yeah. So I think taking the rook on h1 has to be correct, I guess. Oh my god, it keeps going. I cannot believe how many moves I've been playing. Yeah, I've not seen anything like this before. Okay, so now what? I was thinking queen h4 check. Is there any other tactics? Is taking on f1 good for some reason? I don't think so. Queen h4 check is one move. Queen h3 attacking f3 is another move. Is that very good for some reason? Queen h4 check is what I'm gonna play. I don't really know. Oh my god, how many moves was that? This has a 7% pass rate, so I am very proud of myself. But I just want to see how long was this puzzle. I'm gonna click analysis mainly to see how long, how many moves did I have to find there. So okay, one move, two, three, four, five. Okay, five. So not too long. Maybe I was being over dramatic. I'm sure some of you are thinking that, but oh well. Okay, let's continue. Okay, black to move. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. So white just attacked our queen with pawn to c4. First thing that comes to mind is queen takes g2, hitting both the knight and the rook, but the knight is protected, so that may not be uh, as impressive. Okay. Uh, okay, let's look at what's happening. G2 pawn is hanging, the rook on uh, a1 is unprotected. There might be a check on a5. Uh, Anything else? I'm attacking the pawn on h2, and also my bishop can be looking at the rook on a1 if the e4 pawn, or rather the e5 pawn moves. So those are my observations. Okay, let's look at some candidate moves. So other than moving the queen, any other moves? I don't think any rook moves. No knight moves either. And no bishop moves either. So I think the queen needs to move, as far as I can tell. Yeah, so queen a5 check, or queen d4 hitting the rook, or queen takes g2. What else? Yeah, I think those are my candidates. So let's quickly look at the check. Queen a5 check. Let's say he plays bishop d2. And not seeing a follow-up. So yeah, I'm gonna reject that. Queen d4 hitting the rook. Now let's say, now there he can move his bishop. Let's say bishop to e3, yeah, protecting his rook with the queen and hitting my bishop. I could go queen c3 check, but then he could move his king. But also after queen d4, he has rook b1. And what is my follow-up? Maybe there is none. Okay, so then queen takes g2. Almost has to be correct by the process of elimination, but queen takes g2 hits the rook. So he can play queen f3, or he can go rook f1. He doesn't have any checks of his own against me, as far as I can tell. So after queen g2, I win a pawn. So let's look at the material balance in this initial position. I think it is white is a pawn up. So I restore material balance with queen takes g2. And if queen f3, uh, huh. If queen f3, could I take on h2 there with the rook? Rook takes h2. Maybe that's possible. If queen g2 and then rook f1, uh, queen g2, rook f1. I don't know what I do there, but I could also take on h2. I'm gonna play queen g2, I think. At least I win a pawn at a minimum. There may be other things that are happening that I'm missing. Just checking one final time to see that there is nothing better. I think this should be it, but okay, queen f3. So now the question is, what's the best continuation here? I can trade queens and then I don't win anything, I think. Oh, I see the point. I should have seen this earlier. Okay, so I take queen takes f3, knight takes f3, and then I go pawn to e4, attacking the knight and a discovered attack on the rook in the corner. That is correct. And I win the knight or the rook. Okay, nice problem. Very nice. Okay, let's keep going. Should have seen that one. Okay, so black to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. Uh, First thing I notice is white has some potential back rank problems since my queen uh, cuts off the escape square on h2. So rook a7 might become a candidate. The queen is hanging. Pawn to e3 is possible, creating some possibilities. I'm attacking f2 already once, so that could be something. In terms of candidates, rook to a7 hitting the queen is definitely a big candidate. Does allow a check, so not sure how thrilled I am about that. Probably already not correct because rook a7, queen d8 check, king h7, and now he has a free move to do whatever he wants. So yeah, and yeah, so rook a7 eliminated. Okay, well, then maybe pawn to e3. Pawn to e3 hits the rook, hits f2. He can take. If he takes, then maybe queen takes e3 check. Now he can go to h1 or h2. If he goes to h1, then rook f1 check, king h2, queen f4 check, pawn to g3, and what do I have there? At a minimum, some rook f2 check. At a minimum, I have a perpetual, but maybe more. So e3 at least looks promising. If he doesn't take, what other options does he have? He has to move his rook. If he moves his rook back to d1, then I could possibly take on f2 with the pawn and then try to promote. Something like that. Any other moves? Is rook takes f2 something? Rook takes f2, rook takes f2, e3, rook e2. I don't think leads to anything. Any other moves? No, I think e3 should be it, but let's see if I can figure out what's going to happen after that. So after e3, if white takes on e3, queen takes e3 check, I think. Or is there something better than queen takes e3 check? Hmm. No, queen takes e3 check looks normal. So queen takes e3 check. Now king h2 is also possible, which I didn't consider earlier. So king h2. And there I do have like queen f4 check, forcing the king back to h1 or g1. If king back to g1, I have some kind of a perpetual with queen f1 and queen f4 maybe, but you can always throw in g3, pawn to g3 that is. Taking the rook on d4 I don't think leads to anything. e3 should be it. I'm gonna, or is there any other moves? No, I'm gonna play e3 and see. So far so good. And now queen g3 could be interesting, but it's a slow move. It gives him time to defend. I think I have to take. And it gives me 5 points. I am not clear what I was winning there. Maybe I am mating or something, but it was not clear to me. Okay, I'm definitely not mating. So e3, and if he takes, then queen takes e3, king h2, and the computer says queen e5 check. Ah, I said queen f4, which is a blunder. Okay, now g3 and queen e1. So I just have opened up his king position and there is some lasting initiative. That's all there is. Okay. So, okay, interesting. Let's keep going. Okay, this one looks like a standard pattern, but I'm gonna make sure. The standard tactic I'm thinking of is knight takes knight, and then the bishop on g4 will be attacked twice. If black just recaptures on d4 with the bishop or pawn, let's say knight takes knight, uh, pawn takes knight, then I can take on g4 twice and win a piece. So but knight takes knight, if he takes on e2, I take back with the d4 knight, and that's the tactic usually. But let's see if there are any details. So if knight takes knight, knight takes d4. What if bishop d4? Knight takes d4, bishop d4. I could take on g4 then, and if he takes on b2, I always can recapture with my knight. If at any point if he plays pawn to b5, I can always take on d4 with my bishop. So knight takes knight, bishop takes d4 doesn't look to be a concern. And knight takes knight, bishop takes e2, I go knight takes e2, so that is good. Knight d4, pawn d4, I go bishop g4, so that is good. Is there any reason for me to insert knight takes b6? Probably not, because then he has time to save himself with knight takes f3 check maybe. Yeah, I think I should take the knight with the knight. So far so good, and now I think I need to take the bishop on g4, because if I take the bishop on d4 first, then he can save his g4 bishop by taking on e2, which hits my queen. So I need to take this way and now recapture here, and if the knight captured, my queen would capture, and I have emerged ahead by a piece. Okay, let's keep going. A rook endgame, black to play. Yeah, go ahead if you would like to pause your video and think. So what's happening? I am up a pawn, which is always encouraging. My f3 pawn is very advanced and takes away some key squares from his king, so that's very nice. Yeah, the rook I don't think can be trapped or anything. It might be more about something about, either inconveniencing the king or trying to make a passed pawn or just winning his f2 pawn. I think those are the themes. So rook c1 check definitely comes to mind. Big candidate. Rook c1 check forces king to h2 thanks to my f3 pawn taking away the g2 square. So king h2. And now, do I just push pawn to e3? trying to break through and create a passed pawn. The idea is if he takes, I go pawn to f2 and I'm promoting next move. Uh, okay, that's interesting idea. So rook c1 check, king h2, pawn to e3. What can white do? Uh, if white goes something like rook d3, then I have pawn to e2 and I'm promoting. And if he takes, I have pawn to f2 and I'm promoting. If he gives a check at any point, I have king to e6 attacking the rook. So is there any reason I should do that in a reverse order? Pawn to e3 first? I think no, because then I give access to the f2 square to the king after he takes. So this seems correct. Check, and I think I am supposed to do this. Oh, didn't anticipate that. Okay, I don't know what that changes. I think I should just take with the pawn. I really don't know what that does. Yeah, I'll take with the pawn. Okay, he goes here, which we saw. And here I was thinking pawn to e2, but let's see. Yeah, pawn to e2 has to be correct, because if I take on f2, then he has rook takes f3 check, and he wins both my pawns. So pawn to e2, rook takes f3 check, and then I have time to move my king, not to the e file, so maybe king g8, and then if rook e3 back, I promote, and he has to sacrifice his rook for the pawn. Yeah, and now it's very important that I don't step on the e file, but rather go here, and yeah, we will win his rook next after rook e3 queen, and he has to give up his rook. Okay, let's keep going. Black to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. Okay, so the knight on d5 looks like might be the key to the tactic. So I notice my knight is hanging, of course, but I can solve the problem with check. So knight takes knight check, more or less forcing g takes f3. Yeah, and then I have bishop to c5 check, hitting the knight, the loose knight on d5, and it's a check. So if he blocks with the knight, I can take on e3 with the bishop or rook. If he does anything else, I can take the... No. I cannot take the rook on... I cannot take the knight on d5 at that point, because then my rook on e8 hangs. Okay, so we may need to finesse this somehow. So knight takes knight check, g takes f3, bishop c5 check. Let's say king f1 or h1, doesn't matter. But then I think I go rook takes rook check, rook takes e1 check. Then he recaptures, and then I have rook takes knight on d5. And then if he checks me, I'm able to either go to d7 with my king or come back with the rook. So that looks correct, I think. Taking on e1 first, I don't think works, because then he can recapture with his knight, and suddenly my knight is hanging, and I don't have a good way to resolve it, maybe. Yeah, so this... Now I think this is the right move. Now I need to take the rook first, so that he doesn't get to take it for free. And then I take here, and I won. Wow, 12 points for that one. Huh? Okay, 40.2% pass rate. Let's keep going. Okay, black to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. So the first thing that really jumps out is the alignment of my rook with his queen and king on the e file. Let's click maybe here, somewhere where things cannot move. Okay, fine. Okay, so that's the first thing that jumps out. And he has, of course, attacked my bishop at this point. But yeah, so I'm looking at moving my bishop, with tempo. So either bishop takes bishop, bishop takes g5, or bishop b4 check. Both trying to win, his queen, take advantage of the lineup between my rook and his queen and the king. So bishop b4 check. It's a check. So let's look at that first. Bishop b4 check. Now he either has to block on d2 with the bishop, in which case I could take the queen, or he has to move his king somewhere, in which case also I could take the queen. Let's look at the material in this initial position. Material, I think he is up a piece and a pawn. He's up by a knight and a pawn. So I am in some trouble. So, okay. Bishop to b4 check, bishop d2. Rook takes e2 check. Looks good. What about bishop takes g5? Bishop takes g5. That's not a check. So can he complicate somehow? Maybe that gives him time to play bishop to b5 check. So if I take here, maybe he plays this. And now my king has to move and he has time to take my rook. So that won't be good for me. So I think bishop b4 check. Any other moves? Let's quickly check. I don't think so. So I'm going to play this. Let's see. Okay, so far so good. Now I think I take the queen. Just checking. If I take the queen and he goes bishop b5 check, am I getting mated? No, right? King c7, and then if bishop d8, wow, am I getting mated? That's interesting. Wow, let's see. Or I may be hallucinating, but let's see. So rook takes queen. So rook takes e2. Bishop to b5 check. I think my only move is to go to c7. Then he has bishop to d8 check. And I can go to b8. Wow, that's so dangerous. King to b8. What does he have there? He can try pawn to d6 or something, trying to checkmate me with bishop c7. But then with my rook on e2, I have queen f2 mate. I think I I think I'm doing okay. So I'm going to take the queen. Let's see. Okay, we are going down the line. It was important to see that I had this square available, and now I am forced to take, and there is no mate. But you can imagine, this could easily have been mate with my king having to go to b8. If you can imagine a position where there was a knight on b8, I couldn't have blindly captured the queen, because with a knight, or let's say if my rook was on b8, then I would be checkmated right here. Yeah. So, okay, let's keep going. Okay, white to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. Uh, what's the material balance? Black is up by 3 pawns. 3 connected passed pawns. These 3 right here. So that's not encouraging. So a tough position. In the sense, in a game, I would be in trouble if I got this. Okay. So we need to do something urgent. We need to win some material, or checkmate him or something. Yeah. So okay, let's see what's happening. His bishop on c5 is hanging. Pawn on f7 is attacked. The rook on f8 is attacked by my knight, but my knight itself is not actually hanging because there is a pin, along this diagonal. So he cannot take the pawn knight at this moment because it'll be check. The queen does attack my rook, which is being held by my queen. So taking his bishop may run into not may, does run into queen takes f1 mate. So I have back rank problems. Okay. Okay. So a lot of things going on. So I think I have problems with my rook, my knight, but his bishop is hanging. So okay, let's look at candidate moves. Knight takes rook is definitely possible. Knight takes f8. If he takes with the king, then we checkmate him with queen takes f7. What else can he do? He can take with the bishop, of course. But then, if queen takes f7 check, king to h7 or h8, I can take the bishop, and I'm doing well. Yeah, I have an extra rook, and he has 2 pawns. Yeah, okay. So knight takes f8. What does he do? I don't think he can take on f8 either way. But if he cannot take on f8, what else can he do? Does he have any checks? Queen f5 is covered, queen d3 is covered, queen takes f1 is covered. Uh, no, I don't think there is anything else he can really do. Maybe pawn to b5. Pawn to b5 attacking my queen somehow. But then I can already take on f7 with my queen, and that will not end well for black. Knight to e7 check. Will it be good for any reason? I don't think so. I think I take the rook. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna take the rook. So far so good. Didn't see this move at all. So this move guards f7 and his bishop. Okay. Wow. Wow. Okay. So what am I supposed to do now? So black's point is, well, you took my rook, but your knight is hanging, and I have protected my bishop. So what are you gonna do now? Yeah. Well, point. So if I take on f7 and trade queens, then I have to end up giving my rook. So that's not good. Knight to d7, just saving my knight is an option, possibly. He he does have a check now from g6, but I think I can always respond even by going to the corner to a1, and because my rook is on f1, there is no back rank problems as of this moment. So knight to d7 comes to mind. Any other moves? Knight to e6 for some reason? I don't think so. Knight to d7 hits his bishop. Yeah, I'm gonna play that, I think. Okay, it keeps going. So that's what I'm learning. As I get higher up in rating on chess.com, the problems keep getting longer. Okay, so I'm in check. I cannot block because blocking with the rook or queen loses that piece. So if I go to c1, then he has ability to check me on, with the bishop on e3. So that's not great. I think I go to a1 as I had planned because I don't see what's wrong with that. So, okay, let's keep it going. White to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause. So first thing I notice is there is a queen hanging on f4. Yeah, but I don't think I should take that. I should see if there is anything else going on. So what's the material balance? He has a lot of extra stuff. An extra bishop and what? 2 extra pawns? Yeah, a bishop and 2 pawns. Okay. So taking the queen will really help out my case if I can survive that. So if I take the queen, maybe he goes rook g8, but then I have rook g4 blocking, so that's very nice. if he just takes back on f4, then I may even have a move like queen e4, forking the rook on c6 and the bishop on f4 possible. Other than that, any other moves? I don't really see. Just checking for any other better options. I don't really see anything, so I'm gonna go ahead and take, I think. So far, so good. Maybe the point is that he wants me to see queen e4, forking the bishop and rook. Are there other moves? If queen b2 check, he can just block with pawn to f6 maybe. Queen e4, rook g8 check, king to f3, rook c3 check, king takes f4, and I'm winning. Okay, we are going down that line. I don't want to step to g f1 because then rook c1 check, yeah, it doesn't look as good. King to f3, rook c3 check, I take his bishop with the king, I think, and I'm fine, I think. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, white to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. So black just checked our king with queen to e3, offering a queen trade. The question really is, how do I respond to the check? So because it's a check, my options are limited. So queen takes queen is an option, blocking with the rook, knight, or queen is an option, or moving to king to b1 is another option. So let's see what else is going on in this position before we decide. So what's the material? In the current position, I think I have an extra piece, right? And black has what, one pawn for it. So I have an extra knight and black has one pawn for it, but at the same time my bishop on f6 is hanging. So if I just took his queen and he takes back with a check, then however I respond, his next move can be taking my bishop, and I lose my material advantage. In fact, I end up being down a pawn. So queen takes queen, really not looking good. Huh. Well, if that's not looking good, then what am I supposed to do? Or am I wrong about that? I don't know. Okay, let's look at king b1. What happens if king b1? King b1, well, he may take my bishop on f6, or he can trade queens and take my bishop. Oh, wow. I have to say, this is an interesting problem. Okay. So I'm trying to keep my extra piece. I think that's really the problem, what it's about. And figuring out how I can manage to maintain my material advantage. So maybe rook to d2, because rook to d2 is not just blocking the check, it also creates a threat of capturing on f2, because suddenly with my rook being on d2, the bishop on f2 would be attacked twice. And if he trades queens, then I recapture with the rook and I hit his bishop, so that if bishop takes f6, then rook takes f2. And if bishop e3 check, after rook d2, queen takes e2, rook takes e2, bishop e3, my rook covers the e3 square. So after rook d2, his bishop is hanging. If he takes on f6, I can take on f2. And yeah, trading queens is fine for me. Moving his bishop, he really doesn't have too many places to go, so he cannot move his bishop away. Rook d2 looks correct. I'm gonna play it. Okay, take with the rook now. attack his bishop, and then he takes our bishop, and now we take his bishop. Okay, okay, pretty low pass rate. We did well. Let's keep going. White to move. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. Okay, so again, a problem where we have been checked, which is good because it limits our options. So queen c6 check was played, and our options are we can block with the knight on c3 on d5 or e4, or block with the bishop on f3, or block with the rook on f3, or we can move our king to h2 or g1. So actually a lot of options. Okay, let's eliminate some of those. But first, let's look at the material balance. What is happening here? Is it equal material? I think. Excuse me. Okay, so equal material. Other than that, both the kings look a little bit open. Maybe our king looks more open than black's. There is this bishop kinda looking at his king and, on the long diagonal. So that could be a factor. Also, important detail is his knight is hanging. So if it was not a check, we would like to play this move. Pawn, f takes e5. Okay. So maybe the problem is how can we manage to, still take his knight if, or yeah, emerge a hidden material somehow. Huh. I am seeing some maybe semi-interesting ideas. Okay. So okay, knight to d5 is interesting. So knight to d5, knight to d5. Now I blocked the check. Now he can recapture with his knight, or he can just move his attacked knight somewhere. But where? He can go to d7. Yeah. Okay. He can go to d7. If he goes to d7 back, now my knight is pinned. Yeah. Yeah, that's my knight being pinned is not something I like. So if after knight d7, don't know what I have. Bishop takes f6, e takes f6, or even knight takes f6. Okay. So knight d5, knight d7 already, knight e to d7. And I'm not able to take on e7 thanks to there being a pin. But maybe I have a move like bishop f3 in that position. Knight e to d7, bishop f3, threatening some discoveries with my knight. Yeah, that's possible. Okay, let's quickly look at other options. Also, if knight d5, knight takes d5, pawn takes d5. Now, if queen takes d5 check, I could go bishop to f3, and thanks to his knight on e5 being pinned on the diagonal, he cannot play knight takes f3. And when the queen moves, then I can take on e5 with the pawn. So knight d5 looks very appealing. Knight to e4 is a sacrifice. He can take on e4 with the queen. If bishop f3, he can trade queens. So that's bad. Okay. Bishop f3 right away. He can take on f3 with the knight, and he has already solved the problem of his knight. And if I take back on f3, he takes back with his queen. So bishop f3 also, I think, eliminated. Okay. King to g1 allows rook g8 check, where I am on the defensive, so not good. King to h2, it's a slow move that allows him maybe again knight e to d7 to save his knight. He plays knight to e to d7. I do feel knight to d5 is the move based on just that analysis. Other options don't seem to lead anywhere. I'm gonna play it. And it's correct. Wow, that's all. So the main line that I considered was, I mean, there are two continuations. One is knight takes knight, pawn takes knight. If queen takes knight, then bishop f3. Once the queen moves, let's say here, then I can take the knight. That's one. Other one was now knight e to d7, saving his knight. And I thought maybe bishop f3 could give me something, but I'm going to quickly analyze this, see how come the problem just ended. Yeah, white is winning after knight d5, so we picked the right option. Oh wow, I made a mistake. Okay. So knight takes d5. Now the computer says bishop f3 directly. Uh, I was thinking this. Now if take, then there is bishop f3. Yes, so far that is correct. He cannot play this thanks to this pin. So that is the point. And then if he does this, I have fe5 taking the knight. And I also thought after knight d5, he says pawn to e6 is best. But okay, I had considered this move. And here I had thought about bishop f3, which is the computer's third choice, but not too far behind. And here I'm threatening some discoveries with my knight, like this. So if he saves this knight, sorry, I moved the wrong knight. Oops, I wanted to move this one. Now, yeah, bishop f3, good. Okay, I did well. So I'm threatening to take on e7 or f6 because those will be discoveries on the queen. And if the queen moves, then yeah, I hadn't seen any further actually, but yeah, okay. Clearly things are falling. Like there is pressure here on this diagonal, there is pressure here. So, and it says simply a move like rook g1, and yeah, something is going to fall on e7 f6. Yeah, okay, let's keep going. Black to move. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. So I have a bishop, but white has two pawns for it. Also these two menacing looking passed pawns on the 6th and 7th rank, connected passed pawns, I should say. Uh, Pawn to d7 could be an idea, followed up with, if I take pawn to c8, queen to e8, rook f8, could be something. Okay, for him, for the white. Okay, so for me, of course, the most obvious thing is take on g2. That's one of the first things that comes to mind. The rook is attacked once, protected once, so some kind of distraction tactic to remove the queen from the defense of the rook could be interesting. Yeah, I do think I need to act fast in this position because, pawn to d7 does look like a somewhat menacing threat because, yeah, after that he can promote and, yeah, bad things happen to me. Okay, so rook takes g2, check. Now king can go to f1 or h1. If he goes to h1, then I checkmate him with rook to h2 check, king g2 and queen g2 check. Okay, so rook takes g2 check forces the king to go to f1. And what do I do there? I do have an interesting move in the form of bishop takes h3. Do I? No, I do not. I don't think that works. So rook takes g2 checks king f1. What then? If rook f2 back, he can always go back. I don't think queen f7 check after king f1. King f1, queen f7 check, king takes g2. I don't think that leads to anything. Hmm. So after king to f1, I could try I could try a slow move like rook to h2, but then queen to e8 is mate. So my rook really not able to leave the f file because otherwise queen to e8 is mate. Hmm. I mean, at least not without a check. So rook takes g2 check, queen to f1. What do I do there? If I come back to f2, he can just also go back to g1. And I have gotten rid of the pawn, but I don't see the follow-up. Any other moves? Let's see. Let's consider any other moves right here. Are there any checks he's threatening? At this very moment, queen e8 could be interesting, but I don't think it does much because I block with the rook. But other checks I think are covered. There is no queen b3 or queen e6. Uh, hmm. Okay, let's look at other moves. Any other moves possible? Bishop takes h3 right away. Does it do anything? The bishop still guards c8. So, well, it does allow pawn to c8, queen, check. I really have to take, I think. If I take, then rook takes c8, check. King to f7. King to x7. Queen e7 or e8. Queen e8. King f6. I don't know, but that doesn't look good. So bishop takes h3. I don't think it works because he can make a queen. So my bishop has to block the pawn right now. Other moves. Queen to d2. I don't think. I mean, maybe. Queen to d2. Queen b3 check is possible. Also, simply taking the queen and pawn to d7 is possible when I'm losing. Or am I? I'm not losing. So queen to d2. Trying to force a queen trade. If he takes on f2, I take on c1 with check. And then king h2. I'm not sure what. Queen to d2 is an option. Definitely an option. Trying to trade queens. But rook takes g2, I don't know. I'm going to play it because I don't know what else can I really do. And this gives me a draw if I want it, I think. Maybe. So far, so good. Okay. Now what? Bishop takes h3. Is it a move? Bishop takes h3, queen e8 mate. So that's not a move. Okay. So I really don't know what I'm supposed to do. Queen f6, king g2, queen g6, king g3. Yeah, that's not looking good. If I go to f2 with the king, sorry, with the rook, rook f2 check. If he takes, I take on c1 with check, which should be good, I guess. Rook to h2, queen e8. Again, this queen e8 mate, that keeps coming. Checking on b5 and giving up my rook doesn't look right. Queen to d2 right now is not possible. So queen e8 is a threat. White is threatening queen e8 mate. That's just the bottom line. So I have to probably check him. Slow moves will not work, I think. Not feeling very sure, but gonna try this. And we made it above 2000. Okay, not in the best way, but we did. So let's quickly analyze that one. And then I think we'll call it good for this video. So rook takes g2 check and queen f2. Okay, and if he goes here, then it says there is even a move like rook f6 or even rook f3. The idea being we trade rooks essentially, and sorry, and eventually we will be able to win his pawns apparently. Yeah, and with the extra bishop we'll win. Okay, so rook f2 also. Yeah, sorry, right here, rook f2 lets me trade queens or trade rooks if he wants, and then yeah, turns out I'm again winning his pawns, which is the main point I think. So something like this. uh, Here it says I can even trade queens, which I agree because my king will run up the board and take all the pawns. So king f7, king e4, king here, and he's not able to save his pawns. Yeah, all these pawns fall and I'll win. Okay, so with that we reach the 2000 mark. Yeah, it's probably been a long session. Thank you for sticking with me and hope you enjoyed the video. If you like the video, please like and comment below. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. I will try to produce new content every week. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next video. Bye guys.